Gas stations can be creepy for a whole host of reasons, as you're about to find out. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. A little over a year ago, I worked at a gas station. It was one of those 24/7 ones, with a mini-mart. Its motto was literally, "We never close." And I worked the evening shift between midday and midnight. Now, I saw and dealt with a lot of messed up things in that store, which just led me to roll my eyes when people were doing and saying creepy or wrong or aggressive things. Hell, if I had $1 every time I was threatened with death, I could retire. So one night, I was out in the store restocking shelves when one of the creepy regulars came in and started talking to me. He was a full-on drug bogan. Bogan means redneck in Australia. Think people of Walmart style. He would have been in his 50s, either that or the drugs had taken a serious toll. And he was tweaking whilst hitting on me. By this point, working in that festering hellhole, I had just learnt to deal with it. Don't ignore them, they get angry. Don't act interested, they get clingy. And sure as hell do not agree to anything. He was saying some really messed up shit. Something about what he wanted to do with me. I zoned in and out of what he was saying. And it wasn't uncommon for him to ramble about perverted acts as well as other gross things. I tell him I have to get back behind the counter because my co-worker needs me to make coffee for a customer, as we were trained to use an actual coffee machine. None of this coffee pot stuff. He was a bit irritated but said he would talk to me later, and then left the shop. After making coffee, I had to restock drinks, but the day team hadn't emptied the trolley of boxes, so I, albeit begrudgingly, took out the boxes to the big bin. The bin is located around the side of the store. There are no cameras, and the people can't see out to it. That used to make me nervous, but I had been there longer than some people, and was quite used to the environment. As I was throwing the boxes in the bin, the tweaking guy comes up from behind me and grabbed my arm. I tried to play it off like he's goofing around by laughing and saying, "Hey, Fred, I know you like me and all, but you can't just get all touchy-feely on me. The husband will get mad." Sounds like I wasn't trying much, but with people like him, it was best to remain friendly with this type. The last time someone was more firm with them, they got knocked out by his right hook. And I was the lucky girl who got to witness it and call the cops. So the tweaker tightens his grip to a playful point and says in an angry voice, "I told you I was gonna have my way with you." By this time, I've stopped smiling and am now scared. He shoves me against a bin and goes to unbuckle his belt when glass smashed. One of my more favourite customers was across the road at a pub, and he had seen him go straight for me, and knowing his reputation, wanted to make sure nothing bad was happening. And when he saw what was happening, he smashed his bottle of beer over his head. The cops were called, and I didn't see him again. As for the guy who saved my ass, so to speak, I gave him free coffee for a month. As for the boxes, I refused outright to take them out anymore. My co-worker did it instead. He traded me for cleaning the rest of the rooms. I live about 20 miles from the city in which I work. I live out in the country. and about a short walking distance from my house is a highway. And on the corner is a 24/7 gas station. Last week, I went by there right before midnight to grab some Cajun peanuts. I see one car parked on the side, which is normal. Usually, just a guy or girl working, and rarely any customers at this time. Do you ever feel this dread come over you? Like you know that something is wrong? Well, I walk in and I don't see anyone. Nobody behind the counter or in the store. So I take my time and assume they're in the bathroom or stepped to the back of the store. Surely they heard the chime on the door when I came in. I'm feeling weird and uncomfortable. So I wait a minute, even though it seemed like forever. And I called out, "Is anyone here?" I wait a minute and put the peanuts down and walk out the door. I checked the car parked on the side, and there wasn't anything troubling. I even glanced on the back side of the store, and there was nobody. I'm pretty uncomfortable, so I just called the police. They show up 10 to 15 minutes later, but in reality, it felt like hours. They search the place and find the cashier dead in the men's bathroom, beaten to death. They called him back up and asked me to recap what I experienced, and then I went home. That isn't even the messed up part. So I get home and my dog is in the front yard, pissing and just staring at me. My front door is cracked open, so my heart is racing, and I grab my dog and head back to the gas station to let the police know. They send one of the guys to search my house. Nothing is stolen or out of place, but there were signs of forced entry. So anyway, that was last week, and about 5 hours ago, I receive a call from my brother, who works for the county sheriff's office. Supposedly, they pulled the camera footage about 10 minutes before I walked into the store. Someone came in, started punching on the cashier, and then dragged him to the bathroom. On the footage, you can see me walk in and look around and call out. And then, you see me walk out to check the car, walk to my vehicle, and make a call. About the time I'm in my vehicle, the alleged murderer walks out the bathroom and sneaks out the back door, and before leaving the view of the camera, he takes off in the general direction of my house. Fortunately, my wife was out, with some friends watching Beauty and the Beast, but I'm convinced that I missed a murderer at the gas station, and then he broke into my house. This week I had a new security system installed alongside a new front door, but I'm pretty sure whoever did this is still out there. At about 8 p.m. last night, I was walking with a friend of mine, Sally, about a mile to the closest cafe. We're both girls in our early 20s, and neither of us owns a car. Sally didn't have her Opal card, which is the Australian version of an Oyster card. Basically, an automatic ticketing system for public transportation. So, walking was our only option. It's summer over here, so it was still fairly well lit, and we were walking down main roads, so we weren't too concerned. We finally arrive at this cafe and sit down. I was paying, but I only had my credit card, and sure enough, it was cash only. Sally was on the phone when I got back from the counter, so I gestured for her to stay put and guard the spot while I went to withdraw cash. This is my home suburb, so I know there are no ATMs around, and my best bet is a gas station a block away. I'm doing a light jog in order not to keep Sally waiting, when a balding, sweaty guy in his late 40s with a tank top and no shoes comes pacing behind me as I pass the corner of the block. He walks behind me for about 100 meters. I didn't really think much of it. The gas station was the next building along. It seemed like he had just come out of a nice suburban house along the street, and it wasn't the witching hour, so I assumed he was going to the gas station like me. He didn't even cross my mind as I entered the tiny convenience store, nor did he follow me in. In my peripherals, I saw him walk past the door and out of sight. I looked around for an ATM. They sometimes have one inside. No such luck. So I go up to this man in his early 30s at the desk and reluctantly ask if they're able to do cash out. He smiles and says, "Of course," and then asks, "Is he with you?" I have no idea who he's talking about at first, and then he points to the man from earlier, pacing around outside the store. Keep in mind, he didn't look at all menacing. He wasn't going back and forth just outside the door. He was drifting in the space outside, from the pavements to the gas pumps to the store, seemingly aimlessly. I assumed he was on drugs. So I told the clerk, no, not thinking too much of it at all. And he says, "Oh, he was staring at you before. I thought he might have been your father." I laugh it off. I honestly wasn't concerned at all. He was still ambling around outside, and I couldn't imagine him having a fixed gaze on anything. I thank the clerk for the cash, but before I turn away to leave, he says, "Just wait and see if he leaves first." I wait for a few minutes in silence, and the guy begins to pace back and forth directly against the front wall of the store, looking straight ahead and never into the store. It still looked like the man was on a drug-induced amble and seemed harmless. Not once did I catch his gaze, so I figured it would be safe to just slip out the door and walk back to the cafe in the fairly bright light of dusk, especially since Sally was texting me at this point asking, "Where are you?" I thank the guy at the desk once again for his concern and assure him that I don't know the guy and I'm not involved in some weird scheme to rob the store, and head for the door. The clerk asks if I want him to walk out with me. I say that I should be alright and begin walking away from the block. As I leave the store, the drifting man stops pacing and starts making a beeline for me from the other end of the building. I seriously didn't think much of the guy up until this point, but for the first time, he was briskly walking in a straight line towards me. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I start power walking so he doesn't think I'm actively trying to escape him, still trying to convince myself I'm just being paranoid and should be more casual. I don't look behind me to see how close he is. I've reached the pavement on the other side of the gas pump when I hear the clerk run outside. He's yelling at me, "Go! Run!" I make a break for it, looking over my shoulder, and he grabbed the man by his shoulder from behind. The balding man isn't even glancing behind him or trying to escape. He's just watching me run away. That's pretty much how it ended. I kept running until I crossed the road and then turned around. The clerk was still holding the odd man, and we were both looking at each other in bewilderment. Not really knowing what to do, he makes a hand gesture to go, and I gesture my thanks. I got back to Sally with the cash and bought food, before walking home a different way. A couple of years ago, One of my closest friends relocated cross-country with his long-term girlfriend to work a job he couldn't refuse. The only issue he had was that he did not want to fly his dogs out with him when they made the move, since they'd be staying in a hotel for the first month. He was also a bit reluctant to fly them out, due to health concerns for both pets. By the time he located a home to rent, he was missing his furry buddies, and made the request of his sister, another close friend, and myself to drive them to him in LA. Now, we are in Chicago, folks, so the trip would be a long one. However, with 3 of us to foot the near 30-hour drive, it would be a piece of cake. We left early and drove long hours. Along the way, it was decided my friend and I would foot the majority of the drive ourselves, and if we needed to, we would let our friend's sister do some driving. We were on a bit of time crunch due to a snafu with the rental agreement, so we didn't have the luxury to stop very often past an 8-hour stay at a Denver La Quinta Inn. As for the journey itself, it was relatively smooth, barring getting pulled over right before entering Utah for driving 2 miles in the left lane of an empty highway. Whoops. From that point, we made it through Utah, Arizona, and Nevada without much trouble until we entered California, in need of gas. I had been driving for the majority of the first day, and tagged my buddy in after being pulled over. I remained in the shotgun seat as navigator, searching through the GPS for a fuel stop. We kept our eyes peeled for road signs, and discovered a sign pointing to Yermo Ghost Town, which had a mobile station. How wonderful! It was convenient too, as it was located directly off the interstate. We rolled in on a little more than fumes when we approached the pumps. Normally we let the dogs out at every rest stop, but having stopped not long before, and with both dogs sleeping snugly in the back, I decided to pump gas without anyone else leaving the vehicle. My buddy pulled us up on the opposite side of a beat-up green sedan with a short, plump gentleman who just turned in to approach the shop. I noticed a few other hop teas at the plump, all unoccupied, and there were a couple of other cars parked up near the station, most likely belonging to the employees, so nothing seemed out of the ordinary until I swiped my credit card. The pump rejected my first swipe attempt, which I chalked up to a misread. I swiped again, and it read out, "Please see attendant." I was annoyed, but we needed gas. I tapped on the window and told my buddy what I was going to do, and asked if anyone needed anything. After taking their orders for Gatorade and Marlboro Reds, I walked up to the store and made a mental note of how strange this gas station was. Kind of quiet, especially for one right off the interstate, but that's no matter. As I walked in though, more weirdness. The first thing I noticed is that there are some boxes of chips just left on the floor, like someone was stocking shelves and just quit. As I veered to my right, I noticed that immediately there was no one milling in this place, with 6 cars besides my own out there. I felt like I would see someone. Things got even weirder when I realized that there was no one behind the counter. No customers or workmen. And then it dawned on me. What had happened to the gentleman who was at the pump adjacent to mine? Surely they can't all be in the bathroom. That is when I began to feel this gnawing sensation in my stomach. Something isn't right. I've always been a person who felt like I should trust my instincts, and those instincts were screaming at me to get the hell out of there. I want to run, but I hold back. I would look suspicious booking in out of a gas station that was empty, and decide to just play it cool, natural. Don't let your body language let on to how badly you're freaking out in your head. I was probably inside of the gas station for only a few minutes when I left, but I stopped just before exiting to listen for something. Anything. A flushing toilet would have been a good sound, but nothing. As I exit the shop and see my car, I begin to feel dread. It's like that moment in a movie, when the hero is about to make it to the end of their trial, but the celebratory fanfare disappears, and in that silence, something comes and strikes them down. I'm about 25 yards away from the car, when I see this gentleman come out from around the side of the shop opposite me. He's not the same man I saw while pumping gas. He was larger, and had a peculiar look on his face. The best way I could describe him was like Nick Cage's smile from Face Off, before the titular act had occurred. I continued walking towards my car, but when I turned back to look at him, he was now walking towards me with a purpose. At this point, I noped my way back to the car with increased urgency in my step. And of course, my friend has the doors to the car locked, like a complete douche clown. There was also a 95-pound golden retriever sitting in my seat. Apparently, my travel companions did not notice how freaked out I was, or the creepy gentleman still walking in our direction. I punched the window and told him to unlock the car, to which he only half rolls down the window and tells me the dog was in my seat, and they were afraid she'd jump out when I opened the door. I reached in my hand and threw the dog towards the back seat as hard as I could, with my friend just realizing how freaked out I am. He starts the car and drove off quickly. I took one last look back and see that Nick Cage had stopped about a pump away from where we were, with that same look on his face. We found another gas station further down the road, this time with a ton of people in and out. After thoroughly creeping out my friends with the story, I pumped gas and we made our way back to the interstate, which meant passing that gas station again. It's been about 15 minutes since we pulled off initially, and we go silent as we notice those very same cars are still sitting in the same spots that we had left them. After thoroughly freaking out for a few miles, I received a phone call from my credit card company about $100 charge at a mobile station. The lady on the phone was really helpful in fixing the situation for me, and was entirely creeped out by the situation. In the end, we made it to LA and had a great vacation. But it still bothers me as to what the hell was going on in that little gas station off the highway, and what the hell was the smiling man's story. I am a 19-year-old male living in a semi-large city in Ontario. It was only around 11 at night, and I had just finished working out at the gym. I went to the grocery store to pick up some food for the next couple of days. While at the grocery store, I decided to get $120 cash back, money that I owed my mother, and unbeknownst to me, I came very close to losing that money. Instead of going straight home, I decided to go for a little drive. I just got my car not long ago, and the novelty of driving still hadn't worn off yet. After about half an hour of driving around the city, I decided it was time to head home. As I passed a gas station on the edge of town, but close to my house, I decide it's as good a time as any to pull in and fuel up. I pull in, and I'm the only one at the gas station. I'm in an industrial/business part of town, so there isn't much around. There's an empty lot that's without light besides the gas station, and I notice an SUV sitting there, about 100 to 200 meters away. But I don't think much of it. I get out and start pumping gas, when I notice a woman come around the corner walking straight towards me. As soon as I noticed her, a shiver ran down my spine. I instinctively locked my car, and she walked towards me quickly, hands in her pockets, staring pretty intensely at me the whole time. I got into a fight with my boyfriend, and he left me here. Can you give me a ride to my mum's house? She said casually, in her raspy smoker's voice. Another chill ran down my spine as she repeated the question, word for word almost, in that same raspy voice. I have to pump gas first, I said to her, keeping my eyes on her the whole time. She walked around the passenger side door and grabs onto the door handle. Can you unlock your car? I'm cold. I've been here a while. I have to pay for the gas, I said, deciding to cut the gas pumping short. I walked inside and spoke to the guy behind the counter. I told him that the girl outside was kind of suspicious and that I didn't know her. He kind of shrugged it off, and I could tell he wasn't interested in getting involved, so I walked out. I figured she was high or something, but I would need to find a way to get her to leave me alone. As I walked out, the SUV that I had mentioned earlier started up. I watched the driver maneuver himself so that he could just drive out the exit. He stopped, engine still running, and he was still about 100 meters away. Can you open the door? I'm still really cold. So many alarm bells were going off in my head. First, she looked sort of sketchy. She was dressed well enough, but her face was pretty rough. She was pretty covered in makeup, but you didn't hide a nasty-looking sore on the lip with makeup. Her sunken eyes were dull, bloodshot, and dead-looking. She didn't look like a damsel in distress. She didn't seem upset, and she spoke without much emotion. No, that's my only problem. I need to go home, I said to her as firmly as I could. Come on, you're driving me home, right? I can't. I have to go home right now. Then I reached for my phone, only to realize I had left it in my car. I'm cold, I've been here for hours, she shouts, which was pretty angry for someone who's asking for a favor, I thought. Then I noticed her look at the SUV. I started cluing into what was going on and raised my voice a bit. That's not my problem, I say. I'm freezing, you said you'd drive me home. That's not my problem. I started to raise my voice as she began to raise hers. We weren't yelling, but it was getting a little heated. We went back and forth like that for a few minutes. My mind was racing. I thought about losing my car, about getting stabbed or shot, about getting robbed for the $120 in my pocket. And I just lost it on her. Get the hell away from me. You don't know who I am. Get back right now. I guess I was in fight mode at this point. I was pretty much ready to clock this woman if she started anything, as awful as that may sound. I think I caught her off guard or something, because she stepped back right away. You better get out of here now then, she said, walking backwards. And I felt my balls tingle sadly and climb up inside me after she said that. I was out of fight mode and into flight mode. I watched her until she got a decent distance away and noticed she was sort of walking towards the SUV. I didn't watch much longer. My suspicions were confirmed. I hopped into my car and peeled out of there. and I turned into a random subdivision to make sure I wasn't being followed. I called the cops, and they said they'd send a car, but there wasn't really much they could do, as there was no crime committed. But I did the right thing, and she was most definitely bait for some kind of robbery, and I drove home as quickly as I could. I worked overnight several years ago, in a gas station, and I would frequently be alone in the store from 2:30 a.m. to 6 a.m. One night, it's foggy out, and some grizzled 45-year-old guy comes in, with shaggy hair, wearing a somewhat disheveled shirt, and pants that are faded green, but not camo army-style clothes. It's roughly 4 a.m, and he starts yammering a bit about he was up earlier than normal, and his favourite store didn't open until 5. A few other things I only paid minor attention to, as I was taking care of my overnight tasks. He quiets down for a minute, and then says, "Fog like this reminds me of Jack the Ripper." And I immediately gave him my full attention. I moved back behind the counter to locate our little stick club thing, just to feel like we have something to defend ourselves with. The dude meanders around the store until 4:55, talking about Jack the Ripper, his favourite knives, and how he gets away with shoplifting. He left to, presumably, go terrorize his favourite store. I watched him until he was out of my sight and locked the doors, only opening them for customers until our assistant manager arrived at 6. He asked why my tasks were only half done, so I told him and had him watch the security tapes to confirm. If that dude was messing with me, he stays in character better than Colbert. So, I'm a college freshman in the South. I am also female. Before I begin, I will need to give a description of myself. I am a short, chubby black female. And when I say short, I mean I'm underneath the average height of 5'4". Anyway, my college was across the street from a rundown gas station, where I happened to work. On a night that I was working, my boss left me alone for the night because he hadn't gotten any sleep. Or so that's what he said. But it was a pretty slow day. There wasn't any specific reason why it was slow. It just was. Anyway, I was playing Geometry Dash on my phone as I sat behind the counter. God, I loved that game. It wasn't a counter with the thick glass and a speaking tube. It was just a regular counter. As I played my game, I heard the door open, with the little chime from the bells. I looked up to see a man of about average height and very skinny, but for some reason, a little intimidating. I was never the one to be afraid of anyone, so when I say he was intimidating, he was. He was balding, with a little comb over, and he had on a dingy white t-shirt with holes and dad jeans that were caked in a dark red substance. He seemed as if he had just went hunting, but I'm not sure what his prey was. He looked at me. His eyes were hollow and empty, but still I smiled. "Hello, how are you?" Common southern hospitality. He muttered something in reply which I couldn't hear, and went to the back of the store. I watched him for a while, before I had eventually gotten bored and returned to my game. After about a minute of aggravation, I clicked off the game and went to scroll through Instagram. When I glanced up, he was standing behind the aisle, just watching me. Upon reflex, I put my head back down, looking at my phone, but something told me to look back up. When I did, he was standing at the counter holding gummy worms and a beer. Did you find everything okay, sir? I say, a little startled, but I was okay. He didn't say anything. He just looked through his pockets and pulled out a dirty $10 bill. The total is $5.68, I say, as I grab the money, smiling at him. After I handed him back his change, out of nowhere, he shouts, "I hate your kind. You and the damn wetbacks." Taken aback by his comment, I couldn't really say anything. I was just stunned. "Oh, you don't got nothing to say, huh? Your kind always have something to say. Never know when to shut your damn mouths. I swear to God, if I could hang you, I would." I gasped and was about to tell him to get his worms and can of spit out of there, but a few college guys burst through the damn doors, alerting us both. He grabbed his shit and walked out. Luckily, I knew one of the college students was someone that I'd known. "Hey there," he smiled, bringing me some Doritos and an Arizona iced tea. I guess the look on my face gave him the idea of how I was feeling. "You okay?" he asked, and I shook my head. No. That man that just walked out said he wished he could hang me. He started off with these racist comments, and I didn't do a thing. I wasn't crying. I was just very, very angry. My friend asked me if he should go and look for him, but I told him no, that I would be fine. He nodded and asked me for a pen and paper. I ripped a piece of receipt paper, handed it to him, and he said, "Okay, call me if you need me," and wrote down his phone number. His other friends came around with a bunch of food, and after that they were on their way. About 2 hours or so after, my boss and another co-worker came in, which meant that I was off for the night. I gathered my things, forgetting about the whole incident, and told them good day. I left and began my journey across the street, and after about a good mile or so, I heard someone yell, "Hey sir, is there a reason for you to be here tonight?" I looked back to see campus security talking to a lanky man. His eyes began to focus into the darkness, when I noticed it was the racist guy from the station. His eyes were locked on me, and it made me even more uncomfortable. He didn't respond, which made it menacing enough for me to leave. I began to walk quicker to my dorm, and just forgot about the whole thing. He was caught. I was okay. Nothing else happened. The next day in the Union Center, I was doing some homework at a table and listening to some music, when the guy that I know sat down. "Hey, I'm glad you made it back okay," he smiles. "Yeah, thanks," I nodded. He sighs, because they found some guy on campus last night with a pistol and a hunting knife. My stomach dropped when he said that. He was this skinny white man. He kept mumbling some pretty racist shit under his breath. So I thought, that was the guy that you told us about last night? I told him that I think it was, and that he followed me back to my dorm last night. He was also stunned for words. I'm very glad that he was apprehended, and I profoundly hope I do not run into anyone like him again. I was on my way home from hanging out with an old friend who was home from college over the winter break. His family's place is right down the road from mine, so it's usually just a few minutes drive. However, I was quite low on gas, low enough that I was sure I wasn't going to make it home. So I stopped at the local station between our neighborhoods to fill up. I met my friend immediately after getting off from work that night, and I hadn't had anything to drink. I'm too much an impatient guy to just wait until I'd gotten home, so I ran inside for a soda. It was quite late and the lot was deserted, save for the sole employee's vehicle and one customer's. I saw the two arguing about something as I entered, but I ignored them as I went to fill up my soda. As I'm doing so, the customer, who is an older man, approaches me. "Hey, do you know how to get to Samara Hospital from here?" The guy looked quite dirty and smelled terrible. He was acting a little on edge, and I could tell something was wrong with him. But I believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt. So I gave him the directions to the hospital, which was about a 15-minute drive away at most. That's what that girl said behind the counter, but I don't believe a thing she says. All I'm seeing is the inside of this building. Okay, there's definitely something wrong with him. I go through my detailed directions again, after instructing him to go outside first. Apparently this wasn't good enough for him. "Look, I ain't from around here. Why don't you just come with me in my car and help me find it?" I can't do that. I'm internally screaming at this point. I explained to him that I can't just leave my car here, but he's not having any of it. He's also standing between me and the exit at this point. Finally, I make up a story about going into work for an overnight shift, as I'm fortunately still wearing my name tag from earlier, and he leaves me alone in a huff. And at this point, he returns to his vehicle outside. I wait a few minutes for him to drive off, but he doesn't leave. Whatever. I was going to get home sooner or later. I pay for my soda and let the cashier know that the old man was bothering me and that she should keep an eye on him. Turning to leave, the old man is now staring directly at me. I whip out my phone and pretended to have a conversation with my girlfriend as I power walk to my vehicle. The old man immediately shouts out of his vehicle, "Hey, hey, come over here." By the time I make it back to my car and lock the doors, I notice he's gotten out and is heading in my direction. I peel the hell out of there and notice the guy dash back to his car. I take off in the opposite direction of home and see his car tail my direction in my rearview mirror. I was pretty horrified at this point. I take the most roundabout route back home I can think of, and fortunately managed to lose him. I locked my front door right behind me, and slept extremely poorly that night. That soda was most definitely not worth almost being kidnapped. A few years ago, I was working as a gas station attendant. I had been working there for a few months at the time of this occurrence. Anyway, one day I'm working at around 6 or 7 p.m. when I get a sudden rush of customers after a long period of inactivity, and most are paying with cash. This is not uncommon working the gas station, at least not in my area. Once I get through about 15 or 20 that had lined up, things calm down. Even so, I keep watch on the customers, mostly to make sure that nobody stole anything. Anything stolen during my shift would literally come out of my paycheck. At about this time, a beat-up truck comes speeding up the station, slams on the brakes, and nearly runs into my kiosk. He parks very sloppily dead in the center of all the action, and out steps a pale, lanky man in a wife-beater and grungy jeans, covered in tattoos. He almost runs up to my kiosk. At this point, I note to myself that the man's tattoos are neo-Nazi, eagles, lightnings, SS symbols, swastikas, the works. Doing my job, I ask him how he is and how I can help. He doesn't want gas. He doesn't want cigarettes. He doesn't want food. He wants to use the bathroom, and wants as much cleaning supplies as I can spare. Paper towels, soap, and specifically mentions cleaning chemicals. I notice he has some reddish stains on his hands and forearms, and I tell him he can go over to the main store to use the bathroom. I give him some paper towels and nothing more. As he goes back to his truck, I watch him closely. He seems very nervous to me, and is almost frantically cleaning himself and the inside of his car as best he can. At this point, I call the main store to report the suspicious behavior, but they are unhelpful. I notice at this point that the passenger window of his car has been more or less shattered, and he is pushing the many remaining shards of glass out onto the pavement. I see that he sees me on the phone, and almost immediately, he gets the car going and drives off, but stops in the parking lot, and he's there for less than a minute until he speeds off. It's getting dark at this point. I want to investigate more or call the store again, but I get another wave of customers, and so my hands are tied. About an hour later, I finally get a chance to clean up the giant mess of shattered window the guy left for me. Upon closer inspection of the shards, I find a large clump of black curly hairs amongst the debris. They appear to be from the scalp and have blood all over them. I get some latex gloves from the kiosk, put them on, and use them to pick up the hair clumps and put them in a baggie, like something out of CSI. I call the main store again with the news, and my supervisor doesn't seem particularly concerned. At the end of my shift, I turn the evidence over to my boss, and he said he'd take care of it. A few days later, I checked with my boss to see what was going to happen with the evidence, and he said the police weren't going to investigate. I'm honestly a bit disappointed. They said they didn't have any hard proof of potential criminal activity until I found the clumps of hair in the glass shards, and by that point he was long gone. And when I called the store, I asked if I should call the police, and they said no. They did send out a security guard to check out the situation, and this was a newly opened location, and there had been a rush of crime in the area. But she was completely useless. She didn't even seem properly trained for the job. A real ditz. I couldn't get her to realize the potential seriousness of what we were dealing with. I go to a school that is a private Catholic university in the downtown of one of the most dangerous cities in America, or so I've read. Next to my dorm there is a little gas station that sells snacks and stuff. I go there quite regularly because they sell Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and literally everyone needs that in their lives. It was about 1 p.m. and I was heading to my next class, and I thought I would stop there and pick up a snack before. I was waiting in line, holding my yogurt, and all of a sudden this huge guy, 6'5", weighing 250 pounds in his mid-20s, taps me gently on the shoulder and tells me my hair is beautiful. I'm somewhat used to this because I have really long, naturally strawberry blonde hair. I smile warmly and turned back around, and then out of nowhere, I feel a huge hand slide up the back of my neck and grab a fistful of my hair. The guy groaned and yanked back. I'm by no means strong or able to defend myself against this man, as I'm a 5'2" female weighing 140 pounds. I scream and whipped out my pepper spray, but luckily, the guy behind the counter dove over the desk and slammed him off me. I was in a weird state of shock, and the guy who pulled him off me was super kind and made sure he left before I went outside. Weird things have happened to me living down here, but never physically, nor in broad daylight. I worked at a gas station overnights for a while, when a big-ass man, and I'm talking big, walks in and goes straight to the cooler for a beer. He signals for these two girls to walk in and help. They come in, and I realize this guy is a pimp, and these are his two girls. They each grab 2 cases of the biggest packs of beer and walk up to me. As they're walking up, the 2 girls walk out, and the guy walks up and says, "We won't be paying your store for this," and lifts up his shirt and shows me a gun. At this time, I was spotting a big ankle monitor as I was awaiting trial for something I didn't do, and proved I didn't do. I stepped back and pointed to it and said, "I really don't care." He looked, smiled, and put $200 in a sack of weed on the counter and told me to take it. I was scared shitless until he put the money down. He came in almost every night from then on and would give me and my bud money for the beer. He refused to pay the store and would never tell me why. He also told me he had seen me before, grabbing a quick toke out the car almost every morning, and tried to convince me to be one of his girls. But I never took him up on that. He was a scary looking dude, and I can't even begin to explain. After about a month, he stopped coming in. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's installment of scary stories at gas stations. I'd never done this topic before, and feeling particularly creative today, I thought I would try and do something new and different that I'd never done. So I really hope that you guys liked it. If of course you did, I would really appreciate it if you would drop a like and leave a comment down below. It goes a lot further than you think, and only takes a few seconds out of your day before you put on your next video. Which, by the way, I have some great suggestions for you, as well as a whole host of other videos for you to binge on. Just so that you know, there's over 400. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.